Welcome to Promethea Yoga. My name is Alina and I am a full-time certified professional yoga teacher who is also fully insured. I want to talk to you today about unstable hips because I find that a lot of people have trouble balancing in lunges in my yoga classes. So the way this will look for people is oftentimes in a lunge, they'll be kind of like falling around, not really able to balance themselves here. And so I wanted to give you some ideas about how you can improve this for yourself, because I think many people don't realize that there are muscles that you can engage to help with this. So the first thing is that you want to square your hips. So your hips, this would be open hips, widening my hips away from each other. And then square hips would be if my right leg is forward, you take the right hip back and the left hip forward. This is almost like a twist, like you are squeezing the hips shut. This would be open, the knee is wide, the hips are open. Shut would be exactly parallel train tracks, right hip squeezing back, left hip squeezing forward. At the same time that you do this, you'll also want to engage your core so that the upper body stays with it as well. So the squeezing of the right hip back, left hip forward when the right leg is in front will keep the hips nice and balanced. And then you'll also need to engage the belly muscles, squeeze the belly to the spine to keep the upper body in line as well. So that's one thing that can help. You'll also potentially, you could try tucking the back toes. Sometimes this can be helpful. You could also fold up a mat. If this bothers your knee, the tucking of the toes can make it a little bit more intense for the knee pressure on the ground there. And then same thing, left hip back, right hip forward. The tucking of the toes just gives you a little bit more of something to grip onto. So if you're in a yoga class and you want to balance here better, you could try tucking the toes, right hip back, left hip forward, squeeze the belly. And then also here, there's sort of two different ways that hips can be unstable, right? The hips can open or close. So open is going to be less stable for the lunging positions. When we're in lunging positions, we want the hips to be closed, but also your hips can tilt backwards and forwards. So generally you want a neutral pelvis, so not tilting back and not scooping forward too much, but neutral. But because there is a natural curve in the lower back, you usually do need to actively kind of scoop the pelvis a little bit to keep it neutral. So this also comes into the lower abdomen and these muscles between kind of the top of the thighs to the bottom of the torso. So when we are, this is essentially like the hip flexors and the psoas and the lower abdomen that work together to squeeze this space together. You take that space from the bottom of your ribs to your hip bone, and when your pelvis is tilted back, sometimes if you're someone who naturally stands with their butt sticking out, you probably are not engaging those muscles to take this space in towards each other. So that'll be good for balance in general in your life, to learn how to engage those muscles. But then also when it comes to lunging, so now we're in a more tricky situation again. This can be an issue even if your right hip is back, left hip is forward, and you're squeezing the root space shut, squeezing that root space shut, you could still be loosey-goosey in the spine. So you'll also want to think about that nice neutral pelvis here. And sometimes when you're getting into flexibility and trying to do some deep lunges, then you can relax that a little bit, and it's okay to kind of get into a back bend where the pelvis is more like neutral or tilting backwards. But for just balancing in a lunge, it will be beneficial to engage those lower abdomen muscles and think about closing this space from the bottom of the ribs to the hips so you're not back bending too much, but keeping that closed. And then if you're having trouble balancing in standing lunges, we have a couple things you could do for this as well. So the first thing to try is if your legs are way back and you can't stay upright, you could try just shortening your stance. You know, the shorter your stance is, the easier it'll be to balance. Another thing you could try is if your back heel is lifted, you could try to take that back heel to the ground so your back foot is flat. That'll also make it much easier to balance when the back foot is flat. Sometimes you do sort of want the heel up though, because when the back heel is down, my hips naturally have to open. I can no longer take this hip down all the way unless my heel starts to come up. That's the only way I can fully square my hips and squeeze them closed. So if you're working on square hips for a lunge, then you would need the heel up. But if you're just trying to get stable so that you can do your warrior twos, your side angles, what have you, then having the back heel down can be helpful for that, and also shortening the stance. But if you're trying to work towards balance in a longer stance and you're like, okay, I don't want to have a short stance, then everything that I've already said is what you're going to want to apply. So taking a nice long stance, we'll think about taking the right hip back, the left hip forward. This left hip has to come forward and down, and the right hip has to come back. So we're like twisting and squeezing the root space closed. And then we'll work towards straightening the back leg, although it's fine if it's bent, but for working mobility and flexibility for the hip flexors, we'll work towards straightening it, and then just keep that lower abdomen engaged as we sink into that front knee more, and keep squeezing things shut and sinking and squeezing and sinking and squeezing and sinking and keeping a nice strong belly. And then we can do whatever, because we have a nice solid stable core. So if you're not so much worried about hip stability for yoga things, but just for your regular life, walking around, especially as we get older, it can be maybe more prone to tripping, or if you notice yourself like getting stuck on the floor. Sometimes what's happening is that the hips are not stable even in just daily life, walking around and standing and such. And so you might notice for yourself first, when I'm just standing here, you know, do a little dance and then just kind of like stand. Are your feet naturally turning out a little bit, like the duck feet type of situation? Or do they naturally turn in a little bit in the pigeon toe situation? For hip stability, it'll be the easiest for the hips to be stable if the feet are roughly parallel to each other. And it's some people naturally have a little bit of a turnout, and that's fine. But if it's like very, very wide, you might work and trying to bring your awareness as you're walking and moving through your daily life towards having this parallel feet, parallel hip situation. And then another issue can be hip flexor strength here. So when you walk too, if your feet are turned out, probably your knees are a little bit turned out as you walk as well. And a lot of times people could also drag their feet. So then when your feet are like kind of low, when you're walking around and you're kind of dragging your feet, that makes it a lot easier to run into things and trip on stuff. So you'll want to be mindful of lifting your knees up. It doesn't have to be that dramatic, but we'll be thinking about feet parallel. Again, we'll still engage this lower belly and everything I was saying before, the lower belly to the top of the thighs, so that the pelvis is not relaxed and sticking out, but we have some engagement here. And then you could even practice just standing, lifting the knee straight up, and then the other knee just like marching in place. And you might notice that maybe naturally your knee wants to come out to the side. So you'll practice just lifting the knees straight up, squeezing the lower belly, feeling, you could even have your hands on your hips so you can feel the hip flexor working, and just practice lifting the knees up one at a time, keeping the feet parallel, keeping the hips parallel, and just moving really mindfully, intentionally. And then you could even take some purposeful steps like this, but ideally, eventually, you'll want to just practice this all the time throughout your daily life. And especially if you're just standing somewhere, you know, it's easy to kind of stand like this and kind of stick your butt out and just like not really put any effort into it. But if this is happening continually all day, every day, then you will lose strength. That is what stabilizes your hips and prevents you from falling. So just as you're standing around, brushing your teeth, doing dishes, whatever you're doing, you'll want to think about not too much, but just gently engaging the lower belly and having a nice neutral hip. So you don't need to like clench your butt or like squeeze really tight here. That's not super helpful either. But just instead of being completely relaxed, just like a gentle engagement. Working the feet to parallel. Taking your knees a little bit higher as you walk around. And just thinking about like walking in train tracks. And again, you don't have to be too robotic about it. The main thing is that we're bringing awareness to the hip space, because when weakness and instability and injury happens, it's because there's not consciousness there. Whenever you get hurt, you're not aware of what's happening inside of you. So just through these daily practices of choosing to bring your awareness to the hips and the lower abs to get this engagement happening, that's how we start to get stronger, get more stable, and prevent injuries. And of course, everyone's body is extremely different. We are all products of every experience, every emotion, every interaction we've ever had, and our entire lineage and ancestry. So we need different things. And if you would like for me to look at your body specifically and help come up with a plan for you to strengthen and stabilize different parts of the body, let me know. There's a link below to my website where you could schedule a one-on-one call with me, and I can figure out if maybe we can make a plan for you. You could also check out this yoga practice I made for strong and flexible hips. I have a couple inner hip and outer hip practices, and then I have longer full-length practices on my website if you would like to try a full-length practice with me. You could also follow me on Instagram and subscribe here. I have little shorts and reels that I post to help with different body things like this. And let me know if you have any questions below. I would love to hear from you. If there's something that you're looking for, maybe I can make a video about it. So thank you for being here.